All right, so one of the things that we do at All Mind is philosophy. So we're not just coders, we're not just technologists, right? We're not just scientists, we're not just engineers. We're also philosophers, right? And that's kind of what I'm going to be doing in this podcast. This is going to be something more informal. I really like this style, honestly. Just like talking, and it actually kind of helps me organize my ideas as well, to be honest. So this is kind of like a public journal to me. But yeah, here at All Mind, if you're not familiar, we're digital polymaths. We're polymaths. And basically, that means that we have this interest for multiple bodies of knowledge, basically, right? So we're transdisciplinary. We like to learn about everything. We like to learn about computer science, mathematics, programming, AI, philosophy, applying that in our lives, self improvement. These are all the things that we're interested in at All Mind. And my goal is basically to do that, to pursue everything, right? And use technology, use AI specifically, to be able to do this in a very efficient way. And the reason why I want to learn a bunch of things, the reason why I want to learn everything, is because I have a deep desire for understanding truth, for understanding, the ultimate nature of reality. And that sounds kind of fancy, that sounds kind of weird, but if you like weird stuff, if you're also a weirdo like me, then this is definitely the channel for you. So, yeah, this podcast is going to be like a philosophy podcast. We're going to be talking about like the philosophy of AI, technology, philosophy of science, and just philosophy in general. Now, before I was a coder, before I was like a data scientist, I've always been interested in like philosophy. So I'm more of like a philosopher first and then a technologist. So, yeah. Well, where do we begin in philosophy? But let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about this thing called philosophy. Because, well, you know, before we dive into that, the reason I'm doing this is I really have like this beef with a lot of modern day scientists or technologists. They have a lot of presuppositions, a lot of philosophical presuppositions that are really, really problematic. Unless they justify it, right? But the problem is not that they hold to these philosophical presuppositions. The problem is they're not even aware about it, right? Okay, what do I mean by this? Okay, what am I actually talking about? So, and you may actually be suffering from this as well. Let me clarify, let me explain. The idea that the only thing that can guide us towards truth is science and maybe technology. That idea is known as scientism or scientifism or whatever you want to call it, which is heavily influenced by a school of thought and philosophy known as logical positivism, meaning that the only thing that can count as knowledge is that which is, empirically verifiable, basically. And oddly enough, like a lot of scientists nowadays actually don't know that they have a lot of philosophical presuppositions, like this one, for example, that the only thing that counts as knowledge is that which we can empirically verify. And this is why a lot of modern days not philosophers, not philosophers, sorry, scientists. This is why a lot of scientists nowadays don't really believe in God or don't believe in the metaphysical. And I can understand this because if you say that the only thing that counts as knowledge is that which can be empirically verified, then yeah, that makes sense. God is not something that you can empirically verify. But you see, that's a problem because you create sort of a contradiction. Because if you say the only thing that counts as knowledge is that which can be empirically verified, that statement cannot be empirically verified, right? Now, I know there are counter arguments to this. That's not the point of this episode or whatever you want to call it. I'm just trying to illustrate the importance of philosophy because this is a philosophical position. It's known as logical positivism. It probably has variations and other names, right? But and it's a school of thought that a lot of epistemologists nowadays just don't really use anymore, unless you're like a neo-logical positivist. Again, there are variations to it. Philosophy is a pretty large field. I'm not trying to like critique this position. I'm not trying to. I mean, I do have critiques, but that's not the point of this episode. What I'm trying to get across is a lot of these scientists nowadays, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, or who else? Lawrence Krauss, for example. Really awesome scientists. I deeply admire them, and they really helped me get interested in science, in physics, in technology, right? All these things of like quantum computing and AI and running AI on a quantum computer and all of these weird concepts that we nerds love. All of this science stuff that you watch in documentaries, like I have mad respect for Neil deGrasse Tyson and Lawrence Krauss, and they really influenced me into getting interested in these topics like black holes and all that kind of stuff, right? And if you're watching this, you're probably also as weird and nerdy as I am. But the problem is a lot of these scientists or these communicators, they're influenced by this philosophy called what I just, logical positivism. And they don't know that. They don't know they're being influenced by that. And Stephen Hawking once said, who already passed at the recording of this video, a while back in 2018, I believe, he once said that philosophy is dead. And you see, that's the problem. That's the problem. Like, scientists nowadays don't take philosophy seriously. They don't. And that is not a good thing. And I can understand their concerns, or I can understand why they might not take it seriously, because you can like physically see the practical elements or the practical things of science immediately, almost immediately. Like if you create a cure for cancer or a cure for a sickness or an illness, that is something that is evidently like practical, if not ethical, and really useful for society. Or understanding a black hole, or understanding quantum mechanics to understand, the nature of reality. That is something that just gives results and can actually inform our engineering, right? If you're joining us on our machine learning course that we're doing like this free journey where I'm literally just, documenting and synthesizing all my knowledge of data science into, videos. And I already recorded episode 1 where we're talking about Python, right? We're doing basically, I don't know, like a crash course on Python. And yeah, basically we're, also engineers here at All Mind. But anyways, so where was I actually? Oh yeah. So that's a problem. That's a problem because like, and yeah, I can understand because, okay, so, you got science that provides results. And philosophy, it's like we are really working in the abstract when it comes to philosophy. So much so that people are like, okay, what is this dude even talking about, right? That's philosophy for you. And it can be really hard to operate in the abstract if you don't even know what that means. And if you can't even comprehend the practical implications of it. The truth is, philosophy is extremely practical, like super practical, probably the most practical field and the most influential field of all academic disciplines. And that sounds like a controversial statement, but it's not. Like, philosophy, man, is what started world wars, right? Like, there's this, probably the most influential fields of philosophy is known as political philosophy, for example, right? Like National Socialism, right? The Nazi Party. That's a philosophy right there. A very bad philosophy, not a good one, but that's a philosophy and it's very influential, right? So if you just look at history, we see cycles and ideologies, right? We see, for example, in politics. In politics, we got two sides, right? We got the left and the right. I'm not gonna defend any of these sides. That's not what All Mind is about. But it's very important that people understand the philosophical presuppositions of these political views. For example, the left has what is known as an unconstrained view of human nature, right? They believe that human nature is unconstrained. And therefore, it's a lot easier to mold the human essence in that source. Like it's a lot easier to mold the human essence in that we can transform or transcend human nature, or our human nature basically. So they have more of an unconstrained view, and they tend to have this view that, okay, because of this, it's probably not the best to stay in a specific system, because staying too long in that system can, I guess, prevent us from achieving this utopia that we're striving towards. Whereas the right has more of a constrained view, the opposite, right? They have a more, I guess you could say, like pessimistic outlook on human nature. So because they have more of a pessimistic outlook on human nature and it's more constrained, it's a lot harder to change human nature. So we have to, like, in a way, conform to a certain set of values, or a certain system, I guess you could say, that can help us regulate our dark nature, pretty much. So it's a more, I guess you could say, realistic outlook on reality, a more pessimistic view on reality, and we're not focusing so much on achieving a utopia, but rather, okay, what can we do right now that can help us regulate this dark nature, these dark aspects of us. So these are the two. This is the spectrum of politics, right? Of political philosophy, and some people lean towards more of an unconstrained view, and some lean towards more of a constrained view. And then it's all influenced based on your psychology, your personality, how you grew up, and your choices, the books you read. It's influenced by a lot of things, a lot of factors. But this is why philosophy is important. I'm not trying to argue for one side over the next. Again, I'm not here to do politics. I'm just trying to illustrate a point. Why philosophy is extremely influential, especially in the political landscape, and especially in the economic landscape, and in many other landscapes as well. Like, just one, and also, it's very interesting because philosophy is very tied to psychology. And depending on how, the collective psyche of society is, a particular, culture or society is going to respond to a specific school of thought depending on what their collective psyche is at the moment. If it's a very anxious psyche right now, if we have a society or a collective psyche right now that is very anxious, then it's going to make sense that such a society is going to respond to a school of thought like Stoicism, which is why Stoicism is so popular nowadays all of a sudden, right? Because there's a lot of anxiety nowadays, which could be explained through multiple factors like social media, technology, right? We're getting back into AI, right? AI is, like an emerging technology that's like influencing the way we navigate technology, and it's crazy because, first of all, a lot of people don't even notice, but when people talk about social media, the algorithm, right? Everyone talks about the algorithm. That's a machine learning algorithm. That's an AI algorithm, right? It's governed by machine learning, which is just statistics. And the purpose of these algorithms is to provide you with a completely optimized feed that corresponds best to your personality or to your desires, basically. So it's basically just trying to maximize the amount of clicks, right? They want to retain your attention. It's an economy of attention, basically. And that's what they're using AI for. AI nowadays, especially in the social media giants, are they're leveraging AI in order to get as much attention from you as they possibly can. And this creates several problems, right? Because if that's what they're doing, then it makes sense that there's just anxiety everywhere. In fact, it was Soren Kierkegaard. I was reading Soren Kierkegaard earlier. He describes anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. When you just have so many choices, right? So many choices you don't know how to choose. Anxiety, actually, Alex Hormozi also talked about this as well, where anxiety is just having so many options and not being able to choose. The solution to that is just choosing. Easier said than done, because we get into this state of analysis paralysis and we just feel so overwhelmed because there's so much information. Our brains are not evolved enough in order to process this information, in order to really digest this information. Like, our brains just can't handle it, right? So it just makes sense that that's going to produce in us a lot of anxiety. And this is why, this idea of social media detox, this trend of social media detox on self-improvement, has become so popular, and I can understand it. I had done it many times. Sometimes I do it. I go on a 30-minute detox from social media in order to like really let my brain rest. Of course, as I talked about before, technology has its advantages as well, not just disadvantages. So as I talked in previous videos, right? Like I think in my video on, what video was it? I don't know. I made a bunch of videos. I made a video on brief history of thinking. I think by near the end, I just talked about how technology enhances thought, and technology is not bad in and of itself. It's just the intention of technology, or the reason why you're using the technology in the first place. Technology is just neutral. The way these companies are using it, that's not good, right? They're just trying to maximize attention, but no actual virtuous end to it. It's just to maximize profit. But we can turn the tables, especially with AI. So as AI becomes even more powerful, these companies are also going to become even more powerful. But we as individuals can also become powerful because AI is also accessible to us. And since AI is accessible to us, we can use AI in order to synthesize the information that is around us. We can use AI in order to synthesize knowledge, to synthesize art, to synthesize creativity, so that we can align our brain, so that we can basically align our brain's capacity to process information with our desire to, absorb this information, to absorb this knowledge we're trying to pursue, right? So if I want to learn everything, I want to learn philosophy, coding, machine learning, AI, it's like, where the heck do we even begin? But if we have a synthesizer, and there's already a lot of synthesizer, not just AI, there are YouTube channels out there that, helps you synthesize information. Like if I want to learn physics, for example, it's like, where do I even begin? There are channels out there that help you synthesize this large, vast body of knowledge called physics and provides a roadmap. Like here's a recommended roadmap in order to learn physics, or here's the recommended reading list in order to get started with physics, right? Of course, we kind of get into a paradox because it's like, okay, but now how do I find the perfect channel, right? The best channel that best synthesizes this body of knowledge that I want to master. Of course, that's another problem, right? That's the problem of certainty and the problem of like over perfection, right? Or perfectionism. So it that's more of a psychological problem that needs to be overcome. AI can actually help us, like really help us solve the problem of synthesizing information. That's the beauty about AI. And I was actually using AI earlier to help me read this book on philosophy. It's called Basic Writings of Existentialism. I was just reading this passage of this philosopher known as Soren Kierkegaard, and I was not understanding a thing. I'm like, okay, what is this guy even talking about? But I created this really cool prompt. I have to share these prompts, man, because it really like blew my mind. So like I created this step-by-step prompt where I'm just gonna like read it to you. So the first line, the first step, your goal is to have so just some context. So I was reading this passage of Soren Kierkegaard, and I was not understanding a thing. I mean, I was kind of understanding it because I listened to a podcast on Kierkegaard, but I was still kind of like lost. Which is why some philosophy professors are like, okay, if you want to understand this guy, then you really need to understand Plato, Socrates. You got to like go over read their books and everything in order to actually understand this modern day philosopher. But some people just don't have time, right? Some people don't have time to do all of that. So we need like a synthesizer, right? We need a way to be able to get the context without getting a PhD in philosophy, right? Without getting a master's or a degree in philosophy. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I want to understand Kierkegaard. I don't want to have to like read everybody else in order to, and mind you, I already read a philosophy textbook. I read like 2 introductory philosophy textbooks. One called Introducing Philosophy by Robert Solomon. So I already had a pretty good context, but I still couldn't understand certain things of Kierkegaard. I had to understand other authors, right? If you don't understand what I'm saying, like who Kierkegaard is or anything, that's fine. I'm just trying to say that we run into this common problem where like basically we're trying to understand a field, or we're really interested in this in a concept, but you realize that, or your professor tells you that, okay, that's nice that you want to understand quantum mechanics, or they want to understand relativity, but you really need to understand these other things in order to actually understand this concept, right? you actually have to do all of that work, which makes sense, right? Like that makes sense. Like you actually have to do the work if you want to understand these things. But the problem is that may not apply if you're not specializing in that field, right? Because say I'm just curious about understanding philosophy, but I'm not really a philosopher. I'm not even specializing in philosophy. I'm probably just a programmer who's making money to provide for my family, right? Who knows? I'm running a bakery because I need to run a bakery in order to provide for my family. And that's okay. That's fine. I got to do what I got to do to provide for my family, right? And I don't have the luxury, I don't have the privilege in order for me to specialize or get a PhD in philosophy just for the fun of it, which is why I don't like the modern, education system that we have today. But that's another topic. Education should be accessible to everyone, but apart from that, some people just don't have the privilege in order to specialize or to really dedicate years of developing the foundations in order to understand a modern day concept that they really have a deep curiosity for, right? So in my case, I wanted to really understand what this passage was talking about, right? What Kierkegaard was talking about in this passage. I realized that, Kierkegaard was kind of having this beef with this other guy called Hegel, and Hegel was like, right, there's this other guy called Heidegger, who I think was influenced by who was Heidegger influenced by again? I think Heidegger was actually influenced by, I believe it was Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, and Kierkegaard was actually critiquing Hegel, and there was this other guy called Sartre, I believe, or Camus. Camus was influenced by Sartre and Heidegger, I believe. Anyways, it's this whole beef going on, and Kierkegaard was basically having this beef with Hegel because Hegel was like a super deep rationalist, and Kierkegaard was like, okay, bro, like let's not worship rationalism, right? But anyways, I'm not gonna get into that because some of you might not even understand what that is, and that's okay because I didn't understand any of it. But I actually used AI to help me understand, to help me get the context that I needed to get. And this is how I did it. This is really cool. So I prompted the AI. I didn't just, fed the entire page to the AI to explain to me. Although AI models nowadays are actually really smart enough to do that, to actually explain to me the text. But sometimes the model or the AI model assumes that you kind of already know what you are doing, or you kind of already have some context, right? So what I did is the following. I fed it this prompt. I said, okay, your goal is to have the reader understand the author's purpose/ideas or idea. 2, you will search the web for relevant context that will help you understand the author's purpose/ideas. 3, you will read and understand the text in question. So the text that I copied and pasted into the AI, the AI will read it and they will understand it. 4, you will recall your context/understanding of this entire text up to the point of this reading. 5, you will combine all of this context, the reading up to this point, the question at hand, and the web search. 6, you will then use this combined information to explain/answer the reader's question, me basically, or text that, he/she does not understand. So in this case, me, the text that I don't understand. 7, where was I? Was I at 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't have these numbered, by the way. 7. To accomplish this effectively, you will assess the reader's context/level of the author or subject matter. 8. Then, depending on their level, break the concept, question, text they don't understand down to its basic first principles. So right here, I'm applying first principles thinking. Check out my previous videos on mental models. All right. And let's see, what number was I on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, explain each principle/component. And then 10, then put the pieces together with a practical intuitive example and a flow chart of the author's ideas building up to that point so that we can visualize the logical idea or the logical flow of the author for a complete understanding. So that's the prompt that I fed to the AI model. And it just provided me a beautiful answer. Like for me, it just made sense. Because once I fed that prompt and the text that I couldn't understand, what the model did is the model searched the entire web to get some context on this guy. Once it had that context, it used context of the entire text that couldn't understand as well. It combined it with that information, and it combined it with, yeah, it just combined all that information, and then it basically broke that entire text into key principles, into key components, basically. So this is known as first principles thinking, which I talked about in my video on mental models. And first principles thinking is just where, like, okay, so you ask questions, you ask like dumb questions, right? So like if I'm trying to understand a specific concept, like let's see, like I don't know, gravity, or AI. Let's just focus on AI. If I'm trying to understand what AI is, or like, oh, what in the world is I don't know, linear regression, right? Then you would need to break that question down into basic questions, like, okay, what does regression even mean, right? What does it mean? What does regression mean in this context? What is linear? Okay, linear function. What is a function? What is linear function? Oh, okay, so linear function is just a function that is nonlinear, right? So a function that is like, y equals mx plus b. So that has that notation, right? So like you just break the concept down into its basic components and then build back up. Anyways, I don't want to like expand too much on this, but the point is, AI can be used beautifully to synthesize information, to really help us understand information, to help us just make sense of things, and to connect ideas that we just didn't even, like couldn't even thought of connecting, basically. And I feel like that we're just at the, initial stage of actually doing this properly. But yeah, so that is something that I wanted to talk about today. Honestly, I don't know how long this podcast is going to be. I could probably talk for hours and hours. But here at All Mind, we're trying to do that. We're trying to help people synthesize information. We're trying to help everyone learn as much as they possibly can with AI. And yes, we're starting our journey by actually learning AI, right? By analyzing the full spectrum of AI, what I like to call the full spectrum of AI. We're not just here to use AI. We're not just here to become warriors of AI, but we're also here to become alchemists of AI. We're trying to understand AI in itself, because if we want to apply it properly, we actually have to understand how this technology works. Because like I said before, we're just at the beginning stage. We're just at the beginning stage of really leveraging this tool in order to synthesize all of the information that's around us. And also because I just like nerding out about technology, and I just want to find a good excuse to nerd about technology as well. And I'm pretty sure if you're watching this, maybe in a way you are also kind of nerdy about technology, and you also kind of want to find an excuse to learn this stuff. But yeah, so yeah, we're here at All Mind. We're going to be analyzing the full spectrum of AI. We're going to be starting from ground zero. So if you haven't watched episode 1, I highly recommend you watch episode 1. We're going to be learning the how of AI first. How does AI actually work, right? So the technical aspects of AI. We're going to be learning Python, mathematics, linear algebra, right? All of these things can help us really understand how AI works before we dive into the other side of the spectrum, which is the why of AI. Why are we doing AI? Why does it even work? And why are we doing it in the first place? In other words, what's the purpose of doing AI? And why does it even work, right? Because that's a really deep philosophical question. Why does this thing work? And then that takes us to the next side of the spectrum, which is the what of AI. Okay, what is actually AI, right? We have to be analyzing cognitive science, consciousness, the field of consciousness, both from a psychological level and from a philosophical level. This is stuff that most people don't even ask. We got a bunch of philosophers here philosophizing about AI, about its destruction and risk for humanity, and we got philosophers over here just talking about, okay, how does AI connect with consciousness? But a lot of these philosophers don't even know how AI even works, and this is why I don't want to make that mistake. I want to analyze the full spectrum of AI, right? From how it works to why it works and to what it actually is. And I want to understand this entire full spectrum of AI, because I know that a lot of you are probably computer scientists or are into technology. And interestingly enough, a lot of polymaths come from computer science. And it kind of makes sense, because computer science is like a mix of technology, math, and a whole bunch of other things. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of polymaths come from the field of computer science. But this is why we need to explore this. We need to solve this problem because this is a deep problem that's going to cause a lot of anxiety. We were talking about anxiety, right? It's going to cause a lot of anxiety for our collective psyche, for everyone, right? And this is a problem that we need to solve. And I truly believe that we can solve this problem with AI. AI is not a bad thing for humanity. It's the synthesizer of humanity, right? And we need to tap into this potential. We need to tap into this synthesizing potential so that we can provide mental peace, clarity. We really need clarity in this relativistic age that we live in. And I believe that we could also use AI to understand the ultimate nature of reality, maybe even bring some objective truth back into this society that is so relativistic and wants to define truth on its own terms, right? So yeah, that's probably why philosophy is very important. That's probably why thinking about this stuff is really important. And this is how we at All Mind are going to bridge the gap between philosophy and AI and science and technology, right? We're not just going to be technologists here. We're not just going to be scientists here. And we're not just going to be philosophers. We're going to be polymaths. We're going to be modern day polymaths, solving the problem of synthesis, of overwhelming information, right? To bring mental peace, clarity, and just help others and everyone have access to education and just learn anything they possibly want. If that is something that resonates with you, and if you're still listening to this, it's probably because this message matters to you. Join us, subscribe, like it, share with somebody you know, and yeah, just like enjoy the journey, really, man. Like, I'm enjoying this journey. There's a lot that I don't understand. That's the whole point I'm doing this, so I can get a greater understanding of my lack of understanding, right? And yeah, let me know if you guys want a community, by the way. If you want me to start like a Discord community and all that so that we can discuss more about these weird ideas. If you're a weirdo like me, hey man, I want to get to know you. Whoever you are, I need people to talk about this as well. So with that being said, I'm going to conclude it for this podcast because it's already like 30 minutes long. And yeah, so hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, like, share, typical YouTuber protocol that I have to follow. But anyways, I have nothing else to say. Done.